So, I'm just going to show you a perspective here from this description that we see on the dinar. Now, this is depicting two things. It's depicting the return of the gods. So it's depicting the return of the gods. That means that the gods had to leave. So as we see here, we see Marduk, who is representing further his prince father Enki, who really is a representation of these very ancient original Anunnaki, or the original sons of God from Genesis 6. Now Marduk is representing the descendancy of these sons of God as they have unified with the daughters of mankind. So in other words, he's a demigod. And then you know demigods from the past, and especially in light of the Old Testament, as the Bible declares, were much more stronger, much more powerful, even much more larger in stature. So in other words, more stout than their fellows. Well, if this is the depiction of the return of the gods, and he's further depicting the rule of his father Enki, that is what this is trying to display to you, that the return of this god or this antichrist will be Enki. And of course we can see the physical description is that this will be a powerful, large, stout being. And if we can weigh this understanding where the Bible describes the description of these sons of God, in which Marduk is, and then we see in Daniel that the return of the Antichrist is depicted in the same physical description as being more stout than his fellows, we can understand that these men that we see from Obama, someone in the royal family, or one of these popes is hardly the Antichrist. Now, of course, they, got something to do with the agenda, but it's not the individual itself. So let's take a look at something. We see here that this symbolizes two things. The return of the gods is the main objective, is what they want you to see here. But if the gods are returning, that means the gods had to go somewhere, these fallen gods. And when they went somewhere, they did something, and that's what you see depicted here. We see the law or the rule is being handed to mankind. And what they want is for mankind, the selected mankind, to rule in their stead while they're gone, basically following their doctrines and their mandates, following the agenda throughout the ages until they're able to return and then seek to maintain this dominion on earth again. So that's what that's all about. They are being symbolized as returning, and then they're being symbolized as having to leave and giving that law up. Now they want to come back with that law. So as you see, this thing is called the New World Order. So the chief deity of the ancient Sumerian pantheon is known as Anu. Well, Anu being the chief deity, what this is really being symbolized as is his order returning. In other words, the Anu world order. And that's exactly what you see taking place right here. The return of the gods bringing back the Anu world order upon this world. So if we look here in Daniel, we get a description of the Antichrist. And it just says very simply at the bottom of chapter 7, verse 20, whose look was more stout than his fellows. So we want to find a description of what this stout is. Now, stout, many people know, means large. In most instances, it could be termed as great or more muscular or chief. So we need to kind of further compare what this understanding of stout is, and at least keep in mind the perspective of what the dinar is trying to show you, because this is all about the return of the Antichrist itself. And they're depicting him almost as the Bible is declaring him, more stout than his fellows. So we want to find if this is going to be a depiction of both this ancient prince Enki, in other words, the Antichrist itself, and then it's a physical description of the descendancy of these Anunnaki, and they're both being depicted as very large. Well, then we need to have some biblical comparison for that. So keep in mind you see him being described as stout here, and then what we want to do is we want to see them being described, or at least these fallen sons, as stout here. And as we go down here, what we'll see is something about the lions, and then we'll see them being described as more stout. I'll return.